guys, it's Nurse Straight, Nursing the Truth. I hope everyone's having a great day. So, go back and watch my video about the real roots of Ash Wednesday and Lent. And yes, I took off my little cross and, quit thinking about Odin and Osiris. So, go watch that. I promise you, you're going to like that video. So, what else is Nurse J going to bring to you today? It's all about historical truth. It's all about exposing what Rome has given us. So, I'm going to read you some excerpts out of, it's a must-buy book, Historical Deceptions, The Untold Story of Ancient Egypt by Mustafa Gadala. If you want to know any type of historical truth, you need to get books by Mustafa Gadala, Ahmed Osman, Emmanuel Velikovsky. I like Ralph Ellis's books. He has a lot of good scholarship. People like that. So just look at that. So Thutmose III, the warrior king. Why do I want to bring him up? Well, dear truth seekers, it's because he is your biblical David. So let's kind of give you a little bit of backdrop. And let's see. Is there any chance that the Egyptian warrior king was actually the biblical David? The author says, let's study accounts of the Egyptian Thutmose III and the biblical David. The life of the biblical David can be divided into two parts, he says. As a youth rising into prominence among his people, and it says, we shall provide the biblical account of his youth was borrowed from an ancient Egyptian tale, and that the biblical account is historically baseless, and that is true. You see, you can read a book, and you can say, okay, well, let's go do some historical evidence. Can I please have a bibliography? If you're going to write a book like this, you need to go in the back and say, hey, where's some of your resources? But in the Bible, we just got Hebrew gibberish. We can't get a bibliography because it's all made up. So what we have is just a made up deal. King David was a warrior for his people. And it said, the author said, we shall prove that the biblical war accounts of King David match precisely to the war accounts of Thutmose III. He was a badass king, let me tell you, people. This Tuthmosis III, he kicked your ass and then he took your names later. So let's see. Now, in his youth, it talks about this David and Goliath business, and that, the prophet's looking around for this little boy, and he's like looking for this kid, a shepherd, and he was Saul's armor bearer, blah, blah, blah. And he fought this Goliath, and it says, the Bible tells us David took the head of Goliath and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. 1 Samuel 17:54. But the Bible tells us, now this is historical facts, so you need to look at this, guys. I'm just bringing you facts. The Bible, the writers, tell us that Goliath was a Philistine. But when did these Philistines settle and establish themselves in Canaan? See, when it comes a time where you do historical information to what you have, you got to start asking questions and shake it up a little bit. Because if you don't, you're going to be stuck in this mindset of believing everything you're told. It says the evidence indicates that the Philistines became an established community after the reign of Ramesses III. Now, Ramesses II reigned for 66 years, guys. So this is after Ramesses II. And Ramesses III reigned from 1182 to 1151 BCE. It says that the Harris Papyrus in the British Museum, oh, don't you love how they have everything, states that Ramesses III built a temple for Amun in Canaan. What? Seriously? The mass invasion of Canaan by the sea people of the coastal plain of Canaan began around 1174, which coincided with the Greek war against Troy, which that did happen. A lot of people say, oh, that's just a myth, that's a legend, but actually they found it. So the walls of Ramesses III funerary temple in western Thebes depicts the fact that the invading people were after permanent settlement, for they consisted of whole families. After the reign of Ramesses III, Egypt lost control over Palestine, and the Philistines established themselves in the coastal plains of Canaan and started expanding toward the Dead Sea and the Jordan River. It was at the same time when the Israelites were trying to establish themselves in the area. Because of the vacuum left after the reign of Ramesses III, both Philistines and Israelites began fighting, and thus the stories of Saul, David, and Goliath. Historically speaking, if David did do battle with the Philistines, he could not have lived before the 12th century BCE, because that was when the mass invasion of the coastal plain of Canaan by the Philistines took place. Therefore, historical facts contradict the biblical time period of the David and Goliath duel to occur during the first half of the 10th century. The account of the fight between the champion Sinuhe has frequently been compared to the David and Goliath story, for which it may have served as a literary prototype. So, you can look up this story in your internet of Sinuhe, Sinhue, and it will tell you about the story about this giant. So, this existed in many texts as far back as the 12th century BCE. Therefore, it was developed 1,000 years before the biblical account of David and Goliath was supposed to have occurred. The Israelites, during their sojourn in Egypt, must have been influenced by the Egyptian Sinuhe tale. Sinuhe's opponent in the famous tale was a giant, and giant people were said to have lived in Canaan around the 12th century BCE when the tale first developed. The Bible in the second book of Samuel speaks of Goliath as being born to the giants. The Rephaim giants and the Philistines are totally different people who lived in two different eras. As a result, Sinuhe's win, he was appointed the commander of the army. Similarly, David was given the identical position as per the first book of Samuel 18:15, where Saul set David over the men of war. So, basically, that's your Sinuhe. And Tuthmosis as a youth, he lived Thutmose II lived 1510 to 1490. He was born of a minor wife and not the great royal wife. He married his half-sister Hatshepsut, the heiress daughter of the father and Queen Ahmose, the great royal wife. Now, Thutmose II had a son named Thutmose III by a concubine named Isis. Thutmose II had a daughter, Neferurah, from Hatshepsut. Thutmose II died shortly after. So they had a big fight about who was going to rule. Now, Thutmose III was only 5 years old when his father died. However, he was not allowed to succeed his father's throne. Instead, Queen Hatshepsut appointed herself as his guardian. 2 years later, Hatshepsut began sharing kingship with Thutmose III and dressed as a man because she was tough. She wanted to, I don't know if she was homosexual, lesbian, I don't know, but I think she wanted to let people know that she was tough just as a man was. I'm not sure. When Hatshepsut died after 22 years of the co-regency, Thutmose III began the sole rulership. Now, the Bible tells us that David defeated the Confederate Syrian kingdom, which was led by Hadadezar. Okay? David slain 20,000 of them and put garrisons in Aram of Damascus, and the Syrians became his servants and paid tribute. The second book of Samuel 8:3 specifically tells us that David smote also Hadadezer, king of Zobath, located near Hamath in northern Syria, as he went to recover his border at the river Euphrates. And this is so funny because I was just reading this yesterday. The two biblical characters later, however, in describing David's campaign against the Ammonites, we find the Syrians and Zobath, who were just totally wiped out, are fighting David. We are now told that the Ammonites were asking the Syrians for military support, and that Zobath, the defeated city, was among the Syrian allies. We're also told that after David defeated the Ammonites' allies, they fled and sought refuge in their city, and Rabbah, present-day Ammon, the city capital of Jordan, and that David's army returned to besiege Rabbah. Now, the biblical editor made a mistake in naming Rabbah as a city besieged and attacked by David. The correct name is Megiddo. The Bible itself disputes the validity of the Rabbah story. The military importance of Megiddo and its legends as an international battleground is reflected in John, Revelation 16:16, is the site where at the end of days all the kings of the world will fight the ultimate battle against the forces of God. And Megiddo is also mentioned in one of Solomon's possessions in 1 Kings 4:12. Zobath, there's no traces of a locality with this name have been found in either Syria or Canaan at the supposed time of David in the 10th century, or Thutmose III, the 15th century. Zobath is actually the city of Kadesh, the northern Syrian stronghold on the river Orontes. This true identification, he said, will be verified later in this chapter. When Tuthmosis III became the sole ruler of Egypt after the death of Hatshepsut, 4 decades had passed without a major Egyptian military campaign in Western Asia. During this time, the Syrian king of Kadesh led a Syria-Canaanite confederacy in a general rebellion against the Egyptians' presence, which was secured since the reign of Thutmose I. In response to this rebellion, Thutmose III led a total of 17 campaigns in Western Asia over the next 20 years, and the daily events of these wars fought by Thutmose III were recorded by the scribe who accompanied the army and the campaigns. These records are to be found in the Annals, a 223rd line document that covers the inside of the walls enclosing the corridor surrounding the granite Holy of Holies, which Thutmose III built at the Karnak temple. Which, I'm going to tell you, I was in the Holy of Holies in Karnak. What a sight. Did Abraham and the biblical David live at the same time? A thorough examination of Abraham's story in the Bible provides the evidence supporting such a case. The story of Abraham is to be found in the book of Genesis 11:26 to 25:10, and there are certain people's names mentioned in Genesis, such as Philistines, Moabites, Ammonites, Amorcans, Edomites, Amalekites, and the Canaanites. And these are the very same people who were incorporated in David's empire according to 2 Samuel 8. We are told in the second book of Samuel that while David was staying at the fortress at Jerusalem at the time of the siege of the fortified city, he went for Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, who was serving with the king's forces at the siege, so to take her and to lay with her. The similarity between Abraham and Uriah is of interest for both of them. Are foreigners. Abraham was a Canaanite in Egypt and Uriah a Hittite in Jerusalem. Had their wives made pregnant by a king and gave birth to a son who were destined to die, except that Isaac's life was spared at the last minute. So Thutmose, he was a very, very tough king. And he had a lot of vast expansion of land. And, people have to sit here and wonder, where is this actual story of David? Where is this stuff that they're talking about? You have to go back and look who was living at that same time to find these characters. In the annals of Tuthmosis III in the Karnak temple, while his army was surrounding Megiddo, Thutmose stayed at a fortress east of the town. The siege lasted 7 months before Thutmose III made his final offensive attack at Megiddo. And even in the Bible, it talks about him going to a place and staying. It says in 2 Samuel 24:22, and then David went to buy a piece of land from the king of the territory. And the recognition of the Bibles that the king of the territory was still in power indicates that David never conquered his place to start with. His other annals said that in Karnak, awakening in life in the tent of life, prosperity and health at the town of Amarna, proceeding northward by my majesty, carrying my father Amarna, Lord, the thrones of the two lands, that he might open the ways before me. In 2 Samuel 6:17 it says, shortly after David's arrival, the Israelites brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in his place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had pitched. Thutmose III also carried the ark of Neter God Amun-Ra with him to war, and it stayed with him near the fortress. The presence of the holy ark transformed this location into a holy ground. It said that Thutmose established a site for a shrine to God. And it says the relationship between the two kings, the Thutmose III and Amarna, is made quite clear from the Tel Amarna letters dating from the 14th century BCE, and one of these letters from the ruler of Jerusalem to Akhenaten, the son and successor of Amenhotep III, states, behold this land of Jerusalem, neither my father nor my mother gave it to me. The mighty arm of the king gave it to me. While in another letter, the ruler of Jerusalem confirms his royal ancestry. The mighty arm of the king set me in the house of my father. This echoes the relationship we find in the biblical account of David's purchase of the threshing floor on Mount Moriah from the local king Araunah, who said, all these things did Araunah as a king give unto the king. 2 Samuel 24:23. It is evident that after King Araunah cooperated peacefully with the Egyptian military, Thutmose III kept him and his descendants as rulers. So when Thutmose III went out to fight against the confederation of Canaan and Syrian princes at Megiddo, Jerusalem was not part of the rebellion. The king was therefore able to go from Gaza to Megiddo and seek safe sanctuary in Jerusalem during the long months of Megiddo was under siege. Wow. So it's funny because real annals that are chiseled in stone talking about people that you can actually find in a biblical text under a different name. What a grave robber. What grave robbers? What pitiful souls will do this to men's brains? So if Jesus Christ was to come from the seed of David and Jesse the branch, it's a fake story. Second Samuel 24:23 or 22 says, "Let my lord the king take and offer up what seemeth good unto him. Behold, him be oxen for burnt sacrifice, and threshing instruments, and other instruments of the oxen for wood. All these things did Amarna as a king give unto the king." Wow. The Egyptian king was the only king to be identified as the Son of God. No one else in that particular part of the world at that particular part of the time could be called a son of God unless you were an Egyptian. Zion is not an original Hebrew word. It consists of two elements, Zai and On. Zai is a Hebrew word meaning a barren place, and On is of the Egyptian holy city On, or Heliopolis, a suburb of Cairo. And it tells us, the Bible says, that Joseph married the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On, in Genesis 41:45. Therefore, Zion is a combination of Hebrew-Egyptian word meaning the holy place of the desert. Other meanings for Zion are Jerusalem, land of Israel, theocracy of God. Names of Jerusalem. In the Amarna letters were written in the Akkadian language and were dated from 1400 BCE. They contain 6 communications from the ruler of Jerusalem to the Egyptian king. These letters are the first documental historical evidence naming the city as Mat Jerusalem, meaning the land of Jerusalem. The letters state clearly that Jerusalem was under Egyptian control with an Egyptian military garrison stationed locally. Jerusalem is the Akkadian name for Jerusalem and can be divided into 2 elements. Jerusalem. Aru is derived from the verb yara, meaning to found or to establish, and salam means peace, or identified by the Jewish rabbis in the Haggadah, the legendary part of the Talmud. The name Jerusalem, however, does not appear on any list of conquered locations during the Thutmose III or any of his successors during the period when Canaan was part of Egyptian empire. The Egyptians recognized Jerusalem by another name, Kadesh. It is Kadesh that is mentioned in the list of subdued Asiatic cities of most Egyptian kings of this period. The first verse of chapter 11 of the book of Nehemiah speaks of Jerusalem, the holy city. In Hebrew it says, Yerushalayim HaKodesh. The modern Arabic name for Jerusalem is El-Quds, which becomes HaKodesh in Hebrew. This word means both in Arabic and Hebrew, the holy ground. Both the Bible and the Quran use the name Kodesh as a synonym for Jerusalem. Other cities called Kadesh. There is more than one location bearing the name Kadesh at the time of Thutmose III. It is not difficult to figure out which Kadesh is meant from the sequence of events. One Kadesh was the northern Syrian stronghold on the river Orontes, modern-day Tel Nabi mine, south of Lake Homs. The other Kadesh is located in Upper Galilee, north of Hazar, and has an insignificant strategic location. According to Yohannakin, the prominent Israeli archaeologist, the rough, hilly, and relatively inhospitable terrain of Upper Galilee was almost uninhabited into the late Bronze period. Since Thutmose III annals identified Kadesh first, followed by Megiddo as the main objectives of his first campaign, this will logically exclude identification of the insignificant and uninhabited northern Palestine city in Upper Galilee as Kadesh. You know, reading this, especially when it talks about in the Amarna letters, how it was the Egyptian control at that time, and that Thutmose III and all them gave the people that were already there to rule. Behold, this land of Jerusalem, neither my father nor my mother gave it to me. The mighty arm of the king gave it to me. So if that is Jerusalem, buddy, Thutmose III gave that land to you as an Egyptian. It wasn't no God saying you came into Canaan and you can go back to Canaan and that land is yours because you're the chosen people. BS. In stone. In the Karnak temple. There you got it. Bida bing, bida boom, bada ya. Written there. He says clearly, behold this land of Jerusalem. Neither my father nor my mother gave it to me. The mighty arm of the king gave it to me. The mighty arm of the king set me in the house of my father. All these things did Araunah as a king give unto the king. We have fighting today because a book says that God gave them that land. The chosen people. I'm showing you this is nothing but Akhenaten, Thutmose III, King Tut, the high priest fighting the other high priest. And until you people realize this and get a hold of what you're reading, it's never going to be any better. So until next time, Hotep and Ashe, and know that everything comes from Egypt. Have a great day, guys.